Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Come Off Conqueror show. I'm your host, Bonnie, and with me today is my amazing friend and hypnotherapist, Christine Gentry. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here.
Christine is incredible, you guys. I met her a few months ago through a dear friend of mine. I was praying and searching and trying to find a solution for myself and for my daughter, and I'll get into that in a minute, but she materialized because I felt like I should tell my friend a little bit about what I was looking for. And she just happened to have this amazing therapist. And she recommended her. And sure enough, she was exactly what I was looking for. So let me tell you a little bit about Christine. She is a transformational hypnotherapist and an intuitive life coach, which she's been doing for about 15 years. She also has certifications in like a dozen other things: hypnotherapy programming, inner child regression work, parts conflict resolution, eye movement protocols, breath work, emotional freedom technique, access bars, Reiki, and a self-discovery coaching program, which she uses all of this in her practice with her private clients. Holy cow, I don't even know what half of those things even mean. So maybe you could take a second to explain. But thank you so much for being here. I know you're super busy. So
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
I have asked Christine to join us, you guys, because you know that over the last year or two, I've been on this major hunt to understand the subconscious mind. And every time I find a book or a resource or a tool or something that helps us reprogram the subconscious mind, I get super giddy and I share it with you guys. So over the last few months, my daughter has been dealing with some serious challenges where her limbic system has just been on fire. She's been stuck in fight or flight. And someone had suggested I research brain retraining. And when I started doing that, I realized that all it is reprogramming the subconscious mind. And the more videos I watched and books I read and all this research I did into the work of Joe Dispenza and the Gupta program and the Reorigin program, just all these different resources, the more I was convinced that it was the answer to what I was trying to help her do: calm down her nervous system. And the more I researched, the more I realized so many of us who are in this community who have dealt with abuse trauma are also stuck in fight or flight and stuck in these unhealthy thought patterns. And that rewiring the brain was the key to getting out. So when Christine entered my life and we started chatting, my whole body lit up like a Christmas tree. Not only did I love her immediately because she is so nice and loving and compassionate, but she had the answers. And I'm going to get emotional because as we started working together, we started doing some sessions, and even though we haven't continued with my daughter, I'm already seeing improvement with her because I'm using the techniques that she's taught me. And we're getting closer and closer to getting her ready to work with Christine. But as we've been working on my own personal stuff, I have seen big changes in my life. And so I'm super excited to introduce you to Christine. So I know that was kind of a long intro. Sorry, my editor's probably like, come on. But Christine, thank you again. Tell me, let's actually first start with my original first question, which is, what does it mean to rewire the brain? And how do you even retrain your subconscious mind to heal trauma?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, good place to start. So let's just get into it. So, with everyone, we all have programming that happens from when we're very little up until where we're at now. And that programming, we're very programmable during the ages of 1 to about 7. Now, 1 to 3, we're in what we call the theta brainwave state. which is a very, it doesn't really filter information. It just mainly takes in information. So whatever's going in our environment around us, we're just taking that in, and then we're learning how to manage in that environment. So we're learning how to understand our environment, how to understand ourselves. So we get a lot of early programming from our birth family, or if we have a different experience, we're going to get the programming from a lot of the adults around us. So that those are those early years. Now, if we don't have a really intuitive parenting going on, they won't know to really help us through some of the hard programs that get in there that we need to break down and understand and go maybe a little different direction with. So what happens is we have what's called a subconscious mind, and that's the level of the mind that basically records and listens to everything going on. It is the programs we hold in there. And so we hold those until we do the same reprogramming that we did to program to. So for example, the brain will use the very same process to reprogram to healthier beliefs as it does to program to our belief system in the first place. So we're all going to have a paradigm that we come into our life with as we grow. And up till about the age of 12, even until 12, we're still being programmed to a certain level. It's just that our mind now starts moving up into the beta level of brainwave state. So we're now in a brainwave state where you and I are, where we're talking and discussing and having conversation. And we're using our conscious mind to do that now.
Mm. So we switch from subconscious mind to conscious mind around age 12?
Yes, about age 12 is when we're fully, we're starting to filter everything, pretty much. We're starting to use that filter in there.
Okay.
When we're younger, at about 7, we start the filtering process, and then up until 12, we're still learning how to do that a little bit.
So when you say programming, can you give me an example of what a program would be?
Sure. So it would be a belief system that we hold according to our experiences.
Okay.
So if I have all of us are going to have different experiences. However, we might find ourselves, like in this group of people, we might find ourselves in a situation where we have some similarities. We have some things that we've all kind of found that we've been programmed to, or habits and patterns and behaviors that we've done, not really understanding fully why.
Mm-hmm.
So a program,
Abuse trauma.
exactly. So a program is based on a belief system that we carry that is usually, it, like I said, it's developed when we're very young. And so if it's a healthy one, we will handle things in a healthy way throughout our life. We'll make decisions that are good for us and respectful to us and healthy for us. If it's a not a great healthy programming, if we're watching things or looking at things or learning things, observing things that aren't so healthy, then we learn to kind of cope in that environment. We learn to create a belief system that gets us through, so to speak. And so a lot of the work that I do is trying to reprogram those early belief systems that weren't necessarily very healthy for us. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, for example, there's a lot of people in our community who dealt with early childhood trauma, like they were in abusive homes. Maybe they had an alcoholic parent or something like that. So they were exposed to some pretty unhealthy lifestyles and patterns and unsafe situations. So what I'm hearing you say is the programming may have been, for example, I need to keep quiet to be safe. If I speak up, I will get hurt because maybe if they spoke up or if they were too loud, they might have gotten smacked or something like that.
Exactly.
Or vice versa. If we grew up in a home that was not necessarily abusive, but just, a kind and loving and nurturing environment, maybe the programming they received was, I get to be creative and I can color outside the lines because my mom encourages me to color the dog pink or whatever. So like they have a different type of belief system. So maybe ingrained in them is I am creative and I can explore or something. Is that
Sure.
kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes, yes. It could be a little different, however, because we're still going to be we're going to be learning from other people, not just our parents. So we might go out into the world and we might meet some kids that we're in school with, or have new little friends. We will have teachers that affect our life and the way we think. And
Mhm.
and we might have some teachers who are not as empathetic, maybe not the same as what we've learned in our home. And so we would learn to cope there as well. Does that make sense? And so even if I grew up in a real healthy home with healthy parents, a healthy dynamic, I might go out into the world and get some other programming through my experiences there.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So then when we talk about rewiring or retraining the brain, how do you reprogram what has been created? I mean, that's so like, what's the word? Hopeful, like that's amazing to think
Yeah.
that we're not doomed to stay stuck in our programming that was
Oh, yeah. And I
created early on.
It's a wonderful thought, right? And that was what drove me to do this work in the first place, really. I came from some trauma in my early years. And so I had a lot to work through for myself when I first started getting introduced to some of this. And when I went into my psychology degree, I just found that I wasn't getting all the answers I was really looking for. So the way that we reprogram is we have to take the brain into a state where we are in the most suggestible place. So for example, when I do hypnotherapy, I'm guiding someone to a lower brainwave state back down to that theta brainwave state, or sometimes alpha brainwave state. It's in between the two. So a lot of times when you're listening to your hypnotherapy recording, you're going in and out. You'll find yourself kind of going in and out. You'll hear it a little bit, then you kind of don't, and then you hear it and you don't. That's where we're kind of in that really suggestible state of mind. And what happens there is we've bypassed what we call the critical factor of the mind. And now we don't have that fighting us like we do when we're in our full beta brainwave state, like we are right now. Because I could hand you some affirmations. So, for example, we talked about this a little bit, and for whatever reason, we could just get frustrated because we just feel like they're not sticking really. We hear them and we know they're good and healthy, but they're not quite what we want in the deeper programmed state. And that's because the critical mind is very awake and aware at that point. So it's basically gathering information from our subconscious mind and utilizing that to determine whether we believe it or not.
Right.
So it'll sometimes kick it out because it'll think, oh yeah, that, I don't believe that one. That's not really truth for me.
Right. So, because it'll go back to its memory bank, right? And say, oh, but there's this memory of this time when that was not true. And I have it programmed that you are not such and such. So we don't believe you. So this one's out. So,
Exactly.
this is really interesting because I've always, I did network marketing for a really long time. And they're really, really big into affirmations and
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
saying to yourself every single day in front of the mirror, I am strong. I am smart. I attract tons of customers, whatever the affirmation is, right? They're really
Right.
big into self-development. And I'd always been taught affirmations really, really work.
Mhm.
So how do but when you and I started working, I started realizing, oh wait, this explains why affirmations don't always work, because our subconscious mind is fighting us and saying it's not working. So help me understand, how do you make an affirmation work? Like, how does that help?
Okay. So whenever we have a belief pattern that's in place, something we've had an experience, and with that experience, we've had an emotion that's attached to the experience. With that emotional state, our body is driven to do something. If I'm afraid of something, for example, you were talking about the fight or flight process, right? If I'm afraid to do something and there's a belief in there that tells me it's not safe, then that's immediately what my body's going to respond to. So to be able to make something stick, we have to work a process where we're getting a new emotional state in place with a new healthy belief, a healthier belief pattern. And then we've got to start programming to that by delivering it in that lower brainwave state. And that's what hypnosis is. So another question a lot of people ask me is, is it safe? Will I be told things I don't want to hear or anything like that? And no, we don't program to anything that we don't already discuss or talk about, like we did in your session, Bonnie. And we just really talk in depth about the emotions that were attached to some of the belief patterns and where those need to be shifted and changed around. And so when we get a higher emotional state, a higher frequency in our body, we can counter that lower emotional state. So just an affirmation alone doesn't do it. It always accompanies an emotional state. So we're wanting to pull ourselves into that healthier, better emotional state. For example, from fear to hope, or from fear to calm, or whatever we're doing there, we're wanting to change that emotional state.
I'm really glad you brought that up. The questions that people have about like how the process works,
Right.
because I do feel like, I mean, I've suggested hypnotherapy to people in the past, and they're always kind of like, what?
I'm not sure.
Don't really want to be
Right.
hypnotized, like,
Right.
or I've listened to, I don't know if there's anyone out there who can relate to this, but I've listened to a lot of hypnotherapists on YouTube, and not a lot of them. There's two that I really like. One's Michael Seeley, and the other one, I can't think of the lady's name now. She's got red curly hair. Anyway, but that was before I found you, because I didn't really know any better, right? But my
Right.
biggest worry was, I always fall asleep in their hypnosis. And I'm always like, what if they say something that doesn't ring true to me? But then I remembered that something that someone taught me a few years ago, which was, you cannot, and I want to know if this is true. So this is why I'm bringing it up.
Mhm.
They said you cannot be hypnotized or internalize something that you don't believe. So if someone says something in a suggestive state, you will kick it out. Is that true? Or will you internalize it?
Well, okay, let me come at that from a couple of different angles. So when we program to a new healthier belief program, we do have to word it in such a way that you won't kick it out. Okay.
Okay.
So for example, if you have a really strong internal belief about men are not safe, for example, right? Um, then we're thinking, if we think all men are not safe, if that equates to all men in our mind, and then I just program you to men are safe, that's not going to work, because there's a big part of you that's going, well, in my experience, men haven't been safe for me, right? And so what we're really looking at is the way we word something when we're ready to put a new healthy belief in there, because yes, you will kick out, you won't accept it. So basically that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But if we want to learn to accept the belief that um, I can be, I can make healthy choices in the men that I choose and be very aware of their patterns of behavior, that would be something that my brain could probably accept.
Oh,
That
okay. Yes.
makes sense. And
Mhm.
so we've got to do something more that the brain will actually let come in and sit with us and stay with us. Because you're right. If I don't align with something, I'm not gonna hold it as truth. It's just that's why when you and I worked together, Bonnie, we spent a lot of time on saying, is this true? Do I really feel this? And you really went into your feeling state to see if you felt it. That's why we do that.
So this is a good time to explain the type of hypnotherapy you do and how it works and how it I really want to hit on how it doesn't take away our free agency, because that is something that is, that objection that I hear about, well, I don't want to be programmed with something that I don't believe. You hear these wacky stories. So
Right.
let's explain how your hypnotherapy works and how it works with your free agency and your free will, I guess.
Okay, sure. And that's a really good question, by the way. So I'm glad you brought that up. So when I'm working with clients, I'm always working to understand where they're really coming from and what their needs really are as far as what their experience has been.
Mhm.
And I we talk in detail about what we're going to include in there, right? Which is your choice to choose what you have in there. So some hypnotherapists will just have you come in and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the programming without really going through what your inner agency tells you, what you want to have in there for you. Um, and it's really important to me. It's really important to have that in place because you're there as a free agent. You have your free will, and a lot of people are coming with the faith that they're going to trust this person that's trying to help them, right? And so we want to be sure that we're with someone that we can actually trust, that we because we are going to be programming to the things that are there. However, I won't put anything in the programming without having first gone through in detail what is best for the client. And I try to set it up in a way that they understand what needs to be in the programming as far as an emotional state, for example.
Mhm.
Um, when we're programming to a new, healthier belief, as I said earlier, we're wanting to get a better, higher frequency of energy there, an emotional state that feels good.
Mhm.
And that's one way we can counter the negative emotional state. The other thing I do a little differently is I do record the session, and the brain, they have found now through neurobiology that the brain needs a certain amount of time to get this new synaptic connections in place to form a new belief. So those neurons fire and wire together based on what you're hearing on a regular basis. It would be the same thing as when you're very tiny and you're starting that early programming. We're just now doing it intentionally with our consciousness, right? So now we're taking that early programming and we're leveling up, basically upgrading, right, to a new, healthier way of thinking. So it's number to answer your question, you have to trust who you're working with. You have to feel comfortable that that individual is going to do what you ask. However, they should also be guiding you on the process of hypnosis and how it works and why, and the best way to incorporate what needs to be in there to make it hold and stick. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, let's go back a little bit because there's I've worked with two other hypnotherapists and it was such a completely different experience. They didn't do reprogramming. Um we worked on I mean in a way we did. We went back to like a traumatic experience and I saw myself in that experience. I talked to myself and I tried to heal the inner child or whatever it was. That was the type of hypnotherapy that we did. And
Mhm.
this hypnotherapy is more like reprogramming, and that I'm listening to a hypnosis that you've recorded that we worked on together. We wrote the statements together, we created the intention together. The whole process was co-created together, which I felt like I could trust you on because I knew what was going to be in the recording. And it was a beautiful process, like the whole self-discovery thing, thinking about the situation and pulling apart the emotions and the beliefs, and the whole process was fabulous. And it was similar to things I've done in life coaching, but also very different because we now added um the what did you call it, bypassing the filter and going straight into the hypnosis, straight into the subconscious mind. So it was more, in my mind it's more powerful because we're bypassing that and we're getting right into the programming. Like you're saying, you're altering the code.
Mhm.
So there was those two different hypnosis experience or hypnotherapy experiences I've had. So I want to make that very clear to everybody that we're talking about the reprogramming hypnosis, not the other, which do you do the other? I don't know.
I do. Yeah, that's called inner child programming work. But you're at that, yeah. So
I
in
don't even know what that is.
regression work, they call
Okay.
it childhood regression work, taking you back in time to a certain event to do some healing there. And that's very interactive, but you still do, a therapist will still help you get down to that level of mind that you need to be in to be able to dialogue with them. So you're aware, but you're very relaxed and very calm when you're revisiting the event.
It was a neat experience and it was very healing and very therapeutic, and I would do it again. Neither one of them has passed on. He's no longer with us, and then the other one no longer does the work. Um, so you're the first hypnotherapist I've been able to find since then.
Mhm.
But it was great. It was just was a very different
Yeah,
kind of
it's
work.
a complete different experience because in that setting, you're uh, you're going back to revisit an event, basically to heal, to start the healing work that needs to happen with that. And so they're both very powerful. The one is to program new healthy beliefs from old kind of patterns of beliefs that aren't very healthy. And the other is to go back and look at some of those dynamics of early childhood differently. So we've got to be able to go back in there and view it without the same triggered emotional state. And that's what we're working on doing through that inner childhood regression work.
When would you use that type of hypnotherapy? Like what sort of uh like when would you recommend that type of therapy over the reprogramming? Am I calling them the right things? I don't even know if I'm using their.
I mean, there's a lot of different
Okay.
names they give it. So that don't worry about that. It's just it's all kind of the same. So the regression work I would use for someone who's had a lot of trauma
Okay.
in their early childhood, and they are in a state where even if we try to program to a new belief, they aren't ready to accept that new programming. So maybe they just haven't been able to get past something, right? Or uh, they haven't moved to the state where they can find compassion through something because it was difficult for them. So that's where that inner regression work is really helpful. It's taking a look at it with someone who's safe to go back and hear all sides of the discussion basically, right? So we might have had abuse in our early programming. Um, and that's an opportunity to go back and actually look at the situation a little bit differently, take it apart, talk a little bit with the abuser about what your experience has been. So it can be very emotional. It can bring up a lot of emotions. But at that point, when you've done some healing, generally by the end of that regression work, you'll be able to feel a level of compassion. But that's because we've gone in and really said everything we needed to say. We need to give ourselves a voice in that early programming, where a lot of us didn't have a voice in that. So we're just giving ourselves a voice in that. We can either do it that way, or we can do it with the self-discovery process as well. It's just that one is going to put you right back there, so you might go into that emotional state more.
So what do you do? It's probably, is it, how do I ask this question? When you go back to a really scary situation, I mean, I'm thinking about some of the experiences that some of the ladies have shared with me. Some of those experiences are so traumatic that no one would ever want to revisit that experience. So why do it? Why go back to that that event?
Well, it's kind of a hard one to speak to, because yes, it's going to carry with it some emotional trauma. There's no question about that. But when a hypnotherapist guides you back in time, they remind you're not actually with that person, right?
You're not actually triggered again.
You probably will trigger a little again. There's going to be an emotional response because the event itself has not been healed fully. Does that make sense? So there will be a response that way, but the hypnotherapist is going to say things like, if you want to speak to this person and you want to put a plexiglass in front of them so they can't touch you or get to you or anything, we're working with the mind that is visual, right? It's re-remembering. It's the programmed mind. So we might do things to help you feel safer in that environment. So we want to make it a very safe experience, even though the emotions are going to come up. And then the reason for the emotions is because we're trying to get to a place where we can actually work on, I guess, shifting the emotional state to a new belief pattern that shifts to a healthy way of being, right? Because it's a way of being that we're looking for. So we're looking to find a level of compassion. Now, that doesn't mean we forget what happened. It doesn't mean what happened wasn't wrong, right? It just means that we want to get to a place where we can find some level of awareness and understanding that we can take to help us to heal.
So let me give you an example.
Okay.
See if this supports what you're saying, because I do think it's really healing. I mean, the regression work I did was really, really healing. It took some bravery to do it.
It does.
But afterwards, I felt so much better. And I did feel like we did shift. So this is an example where, let's say we were, I'm just going to say it, sexually assaulted as a kid.
Okay. Sure.
And you go back to that moment, and obviously there's going to be a lot of fear and stuff like that, but the emotions and the belief states that might come from that are, I don't have boundaries, or my boundaries aren't respected, or I am only my body's I'm only worth my body, or there could be a bunch of different belief systems that stem from that one experience, right? Some of the things I've heard some of the ladies say, the boundaries one, the body image things, or they started eating to protect themselves from their abuser so that their abuser would leave them alone,
Right.
different things like that, right? So you go back to that moment and um, you bring up the emotion so then you can process it. And I'm trying to remember exactly what we did. I was able to voice my feelings and have a conversation with the abuser and share this is not okay. And then also turn around and talk to myself and say, you were just a child. Do not blame yourself for this experience.
Mhm.
For me, for me, talking to myself and telling myself and forgiving myself for not being able to move and not being able to speak, and the things I learned from that was so healing to be able to talk to myself. Talking to my abuser was like, what's the word? It felt good to stand up for myself, and it felt good to put up a boundary, and it felt good to like confront them. But I don't know what it's like for other people. That was my experience. But I was able to just, I don't know, reframe, I think is what ended up happening. I was able to reframe the experience
Mm.
and tell my little self, like, a new perspective and a new truth, and be able to that was it. I was able to speak truth to myself. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
really, really neat. So when you've done this with other clients, how can you give us an example of how that shifts and why it shifts?
Well, the reason it shifts is the same thing. We're in a lower brainwave state. When
Okay.
when we're having that conversation, we're in that lower brainwave state and we're ready to receive. We're not really fighting anything. And I'm just the guide in that state. But you will kind of guide me to where you want to go with it. So I might ask you some questions with what is it you need to say? What is it you want to hear? What is it you need to tell your younger child self? So we're going to kind of dialogue together, but you're in that lower brainwave state, so you're ready to receive differently than if we're in a beta brainwave state
Mhm.
and we're talking about it, right?
Okay, so that's why it's more powerful.
It is more powerful. Um, we okay, you're bringing up some really good
I
things.
know, I'm sorry. This was not on my list of questions, you
Yeah,
guys. I'm throwing
this
her
is
audibles.
this
So
is
I
really
given her a list of questions, and we're going a completely different direction. I'm
and
so sorry.
that's okay. I love what you're asking because these are really important. Um, so that it will take more than one experience with that.
Okay.
Because what happens is it kind of fans out into different aspects of how we grew up and what we believed about ourselves through that experience when we felt incapable of helping ourselves. So we
Mhm.
we felt somewhat powerless in
Yes,
that
yes.
situation, right? Yes. And so it is going to, even though we have that beautiful healing experience in their regression work, um, that people will still find that sometimes they're still noticing behaviors happening that they've done that aren't really healthy.
Mhm,
Um, Sometimes they're still doing coping techniques that aren't really the best for them,
mhm.
right?
Yep.
And so that's why we come at it from different angles. The inner regression work is the door in to kind of say, okay, I get to talk to my inner child. I get to talk to the perpetrator. I get to say everything I need to say that maybe I wasn't allowed to say back then to them, right? Um, but then still, we've created some patterns of behavior in our life based on the experience.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? So it doesn't mean that all of a sudden our behaviors are going to change or be different right off. We have to do some of our own personal work to help with those awarenesses. But what it will do is it will it will bring to it a level of compassion we may not have had before. We might actually eventually get to the place where we can look at the perpetrator a little differently with different eyes to see that this person very likely might have been abused. That person very likely had things in their past that were very unhealthy. Now, does that excuse the behavior? No. But it can move us to a level of compassion that we may not have been able to move to before.
Mhm.
Does that mean I'd ever be around that person again? No. I wouldn't choose to put myself in that space again. So we develop reference points along the way. But we've got to do the other work, a little bit deeper work. That's why we do the reprogramming work, because we've developed some patterns of thought to cope. We've developed some beliefs to cope through what might seem like a traumatic situation coming into our space, right? Or we might find ourselves in relationships that are very unhealthy for us, but we're afraid to get out of them because we go back into that old powerless feeling.
Mm.
So we've kind of got to come at it from different angles to really kind of get the depth of what it created in our life. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense as to why, after we can do a trauma release, or what some people call trauma release, right? Where you identify it and stuff like that, why the patterns don't change, because
Right.
belief system's still there and the habits are still there, and that wiring is
Is
it's
there.
still wired that way, right? So until you rewire it,
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
can you can release the trauma, you can find forgiveness and compassion and grace for yourself and for the situation and for the people who may have sinned against you or whatever. But that explains why it doesn't actually change some of
Right.
some of our things.
We're going to have to take action. So we're going to have to, we can guide the mind to go get a better view of the whole situation, right? And we can guide the mind from our grown up version of ourselves. So our grown up self can say, you're perfectly safe. I'm here with you. I've got you. So it's how we would care for a little child, or how we would take care of a child of our own.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're going to go back to start the process and then bring that forward to now start looking at for what am I doing in my life? What do I need to look at that is causing me to either stay in unhealthy situations or not respect myself, to not speak up for myself, to believe that I'm less than, not as good as, or not worthwhile. So there's a lot of different pieces that come from that early programming experience that we have to kind of go at it at different angles, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Does that
That
make sense?
makes total sense. So, we're about out of time. So I want to invite everybody to, if you have more questions for Christine, type them in the comments, or send me a message and I'll pass them along to her. But she also offers, I'm going to do this for her because not everyone likes to do it, but she also offers free consultations that you can schedule through her website. So if you're intrigued by hypnosis and what she said really spoken to you, and you're ready to break some patterns and false beliefs and move forward in your life and really stop the cycle of abuse and heal some of these deep wounds, I implore you, reach out to her. She is so sweet and loving. And she was one of the first people who helped me feel validated in what I was going through. She helped me feel like, not that it was okay that I was feeling the feelings I was feeling, but she helped me understand that the feelings I was feeling were natural response to what was happening.
Mhm.
And she was so um, safe. That's the best word I can use to describe Christine. She made me feel safe. And that doesn't happen from a lot of therapists. I don't always feel safe because I've been in situations where they've invalidated me and told me that I shouldn't feel this way or whatever it was. But she was the exact opposite. She was very, very safe. So I highly recommend that if you're ready to make some changes, give her a call, reach out to her. I'll put her information down below. Um, she's fabulous. So, Christine, in the last couple minutes that we have, do you mind kind of talking to them about what they can expect in talking with you? That if they do choose to give you a buzz, this is what they can expect.
Sure, of course. So generally, I start out with it. I think we did the 3-session package with you, didn't we, to start out? Yeah. And I like to start there, which means that we have time to really dive in together on uncovering the pieces that we need to get to really understand the situation that needs healing. And so the self-discovery process takes about an hour and a half. Sometimes it'll go a little bit longer, but not generally a lot longer than that. And then once I have that information, we are going to be working together to create the suggestions that we feel are the most needed to help start the retraining of the brain. And then there's a lot of times where there's a whole lot of emotion that comes up during the session work. And when that happens, generally, I will try to get a little bit of the eye movement therapy in there with people too, because eye movement therapy is very helpful. It's very similar to EMDR if you're familiar with that. And so we might visit that if there's a whole lot of emotion coming up where someone is having a hard time moving past the negative belief and negative emotion. So we might take a little break and go in there and do that. It's very intuitive. So I just go with what I'm intuitively guided to do to help that individual, because everybody is individual and has their own needs and their own experiences, and so it needs to be a very individual kind of a session. And then the last time is the third session is the hypnosis work generally. Now, you and we continued on for a couple more sessions together to explore things a little bit deeper. And so then after that, you can just set it up hourly if you want to kind of go in and explore things a little bit deeper. But that's generally how I start the session work. And I do just kind of let I just listen to spiritual guidance that comes through and just work individually with, there's all walks of life. People come from different places with that. Their belief systems are different.
Mhm.
And I just want to be very honoring of wherever you come from with those beliefs. So that's generally how I start out.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and for us, it was 4 sessions. By the end, she gave me a recording, and I listened to it every single night, and I've been listening to it. We'll do that for about 2 months, right? I think is what you said,
Yeah.
about 2 months.
2 months.
And then we'll probably, I think we'll have another revisit and maybe change some of that, but it's been, as I've been doing this for a month now, and I really feel like, um a lot of it has shifted for me. There's a lot of, come off Conqueror. The whole point of this show was to help women receive their power back, to take
Oh,
back their power.
yeah. I love that you're doing this, Bonnie. It's
Yeah,
so
thank
needed,
you.
so needed out there. Yeah.
Well, and the whole point is just so that we can feel like we can take back our power because, like you said in the beginning, earlier on, when we've been abused, we feel powerless.
Right.
And for me, there were some unhealthy patterns associated with eating, and I was getting really stuck on my weight loss and on this plateau, and I could not get off of this plateau. And I'm like, what is going on? I'm eating as healthy as I possibly can. I've gone to the doctor, yada, yada, yada. Like physically, everything is on par. Like it's got to be spiritual and emotional in nature. Like there's nothing else that makes sense. And so then I started trying to go at it from like all these different emotional things. And that's when I ended up telling my dear friend about the situation I was in. And she was like, "Oh, you gotta call Christine." And then her husband said, "Oh, she's been so great. She's really helped me with my self-worth and yada, 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 and like heal some of this stuff." And like both of them have been through doozies. They've had some serious traumatic things go happen in their lives. And for them to say that they have found healing, I was like, okay, this is like not an average therapist. I need to talk to her. And sure enough, y'all, like it's been amazing. It's been really healing. I don't find myself randomly, mindlessly going to the pantry. I like there's just been, and it's interesting because our recording really has nothing to do with weight loss at all. It
Mhm.
has to do with some internal belief systems that I had about me and who I am and my worth and things like that. And but magically it has helped some of this. I say magically because it's really not magic, but you know what I mean. It's been really, really helpful. So I can't stress it enough. Please talk to her. Be brave. This is, and you are worth it. You guys, you are so worth it. You are loved.
Mm.
And when we heal ourselves, we heal our families. I don't know if anyone else, while she was talking about the how suggestible we are as little kids, think to ourselves, "Oh shoot, I just screwed up my kids." You know, that thought really came to my mind a couple of times while she was saying that. But I want to testify to you that as you start to heal yourself, your kids follow suit and they're not lost. Like we can't repair some of the damage that may have been done. Um, I know we're out of time, but I really feel like I need you to speak to that for a second.
Yeah, I would love to jump in there because there are a lot of us who feel like, oh my goodness, now that I know this, how do I go backwards? How do I undo some of this? But but the knowledge, once we have the knowledge and we put it into action, it's never too late. We can now go back and really help our children understand different ways of doing things. We can teach them how to manage their belief patterns and their emotional states. We can say the I'm sorry's that we need to say, and get in there and let them know, I'm sorry and here's what I'm going to be doing different, so they can understand mom's really doing her work to really get in there and do some deeper healing, and they will love and appreciate you for that. It's even in, when I started getting into this and doing this years ago, I did notice my kids started coming to me. They actually come to me now to do work on them, and they'll call me, Mom, I need a session. And so now they actually trust me, whereas years ago that wouldn't have been the case. I had too much of my own stuff that I was trying to heal from. And so I, it's really important to, once you get into that space where you're healing yourself, part of the inner healing is letting go of judgment towards yourself, because we we've done things based on our inner programming. Oh, everybody has. So you're not alone in this. And so one of the biggest things that you need to do is say, I'm choosing not to go into judgment of myself. That doesn't mean we're not going to look at our stuff.
Mhm.
We're definitely going to look at our stuff, and we're definitely going to work on healing that and moving past the old unhealthy programs. But we're going to do it in such a way that we don't blame, shame, judge, and throw in all that unhealthy continued patterning that we've done in the past. So it's just not necessary to keep into that judgment and blame and shame of ourselves in our parenting, because we've all pretty much done what we've known how to do at the time with what the resources we had, right? And the programming we had. And Until we're taught it, we don't really know it.
Mhm.
Once we're taught it, then now we have the ability to take action and really take that healing to a deep level. So there's always hope there, and there's no need to go into judgment on that. Just understanding and awareness.
Thank you, Christine. See what I mean? She's so compassionate, and she
Oh,
helps me feel like I can give myself compassion and grace, and I
yeah.
love her, and I love you, and I love all of you. Thanks everybody for being here with us this week. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like and share and all of that. Please share this video with anyone that you know that might really need to let go of some past trauma and heal. I you guys know this, that I'm very prayerful about who we bring on the show, and I knew from the first 5 minutes of meeting Christine that we needed her on this show because she was going to help somebody, a lot of people. So thanks everybody for sharing, and thanks Christine for being here. Don't forget, I'll put her information down below for all of you to contact her. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you. We'll see you later. Thanks, Bonnie.